السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له، ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، ونشهد أن سيدنا محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. Respected brothers, respected sisters, yesterday we were discussing the symptoms of a poor heart, a hard heart which is hardened and is not able to allow us to enjoy the benefits, the spiritual benefits. So inshallah we will be discussing what are those things that causes that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned them in the Quran very clearly. The things that causes the heart to become very hard, like a rock. The first one is al-i'rad an al-dhikri. Now before going into this here, Ibn al-Qayyim Jawzi rahmatullahi alayhi explains 3 conditions of a heart. He mentions in his kitab called Al-Wabil Sayyib, a very famous kitab, he mentions 3 conditions of a heart. Number 1, a heart which is like a haunted house. It is completely like a heart of a disbeliever. So shaitan makes that a home, and shaitan really does not care about that house at all and that heart. And then you have a second heart, which is iqbalun wa idbarun. So you have, the person has iman, he does those things which will illuminate and brighten the heart, but at times he will put the light off and make it dark. So it's like a house which has some things in it, and it's accessible. Someone will come to take something. So shaitan, this second type of heart, is a heart where shaitan comes and goes. And the third type of heart is that heart where a person that does a lot of dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So any time the shaitan tries to come close to the heart, the dhikr of Allah ta'ala removes the shaitan. Allah ta'ala says in the Quran that وَإِمَّا يَنزَغَنَّغَ الشَّيْطَانِ نَزْغًا فَاسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ إِنَّ الَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا إِذَا مَسَّهُمْ طَائِفٌ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ تَذَكَّرُوا فَإِذَا هُمْ مُبْصِرُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that as soon as they say أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, or they take the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then the shaitan runs away. So you have 3. 1, no iman, no dhikr, no nothing. The other one, sometime he does, sometime he doesn't do. And the third one is always illuminated with the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Ibn al-Qayyim Jawzi rahmatullahi gives an example that to give a better understanding, he gives another example. And the second example is that if you have 3 houses, one house is a house of a prime minister and a king. Now you know that a prime minister's house, a king's house, it has a lot of security. Even forget about getting close to the house, there's going to be security on the roads. Even that area, you will not be able to go because there's so much security. And then you have another house, which is a house of an ordinary person. There is no security, but it has something inside that someone can steal, and someone will come in, someone may not come. And you have a third house where there is absolutely nothing inside. It's just like a squatter camp. There is nothing there. So Ibn al-Qayyim Jawzi rahmatullahi alayhi, after giving this example here, so you have 3 houses. One is the house of the king, one is a house of an ordinary person, and one is a house of a poor person. So which house is the thief going to go to? Not the first house, because the first house has too much security. He will not be able to take all the risk and the chances to go to the first type of house, because the risk is too high. And the third house, there is nothing there. It's just a squatter camp. There is nothing there. What is he going to steal from there? So the only house he can go to is the second house, where there are items there where he can easily access and go. So this is a condition of a believer. A believer, when he illuminates himself with the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he makes his house like the house of a king, where even the shaitan tries to go near it, then he is repelled and pushed away, because he's constantly in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then you have the second house, where the security is not so strong, so he tries to get into that house whenever he can, and he tries to put all kinds of issues, create fight between husband and wife, create misunderstanding between husband and wife, all kinds of mayhem, discord, problems and issues. He tries to do whatever he could, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned, Inna shaytana lakum aduwwun fattakhiduhu aduwwa innama yad'u hizbahu liyakunu min ashabi sa'ir. So shaitan will try to do this, and shaitan will try to do this in a good way, in a positive way. Whenever a shaitan, he tries to attack people, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says? Allah ta'ala has said this in many places, that فَزَيِّنَ لَهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ أَعْمَالَهُمْ فَصَدَّهُمْ عَنِ السَّبِيلِ فَهُمْ لَا يَهْتَدُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, فَزَيِّنَ لَهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ أَعْمَالَهُمْ فَصَدَّهُمْ عَنِ السَّبِيلِ فَهُمْ لَا يَهْتَدُونَ. Husband and wife are having argument. A father and a son are having argument. A daughter and a mother are having argument. And maybe two brothers are fighting. So shaitan will make both of them think that they are right, and both of them will consider that the other person is wrong. So shaitan's job is to what? Sugarcoat it. Shaitan's job is what? To put a nice fancy wrapper around junk food. So we eat chips, we eat chocolates. So chocolates, chips, all these things are what? Junk food. We call it junk food. We know that they're not healthy, but they're, mashallah, with a nice fancy glitter wrapper around it. And the way they're marketed, that, you just want to take a bite of it, a cake, when it's in front of you. Even me yesterday, one brother brought the cake, and, doctor has told me to take, precaution in terms of what I'm eating. Now the cake was there, I was trying to avoid the cake, but it's just right in front of you. It's so tempting. It's got the beautiful flavoring, it's got that decoration on it, icing on it, strawberry on it, so many things on it. But that especially if you're diabetic, it could be problematic for you. But despite that, the way it's presented, we want to eat it. So that's exactly what shaitan does. That any bad deed, we call it junk food, but it is wrapped up in a beautiful wrap. Almonds, peanuts, pistachios, they're just normal. You don't see them wrapped up in fancy wrappers, but they're healthy food. Right? Fruits are not wrapped up, but junk food is, and they're presented in that way. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that زُيِّنَ لَهُمْ سُوءُ أَعْمَالِهِمْ. That what shaitan does is he beautifies all the bad deeds. So shaitan will make the father think he is right. The shaitan will make the son think that he is right and the father is wrong. The mother, the daughter will think that she is right and the mother is wrong. The two brothers are fighting, and it becomes very ugly. It becomes so ugly that this fight actually leads to hurting one another, killing one another, fighting with one another. And we find many stories like that happening in the society. So that is the job of shaitan. So my respected brothers, after understanding these three hearts here, I want to focus on few of the points here. This topic is long. I don't know if I'll be able to cover this or not. But the first thing that will make our hearts very hard is إعراض عن الذكر. قال الله تعالى ومن أعرض عن ذكري. The person who does not remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one who turns away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give him a miserable life. He will have a miserable life. Few youngsters, many years ago, they came to me in a different masjid, and we were sitting right close to the musalla here, by the mimbar, and he told me that I had over 100,000. Now this I'm talking about 10 years ago. He said I had $100,000 in my account. I had everything. I used to party. You can't imagine what I had. What you have never ever dreamt of. I had everything. But at the end he says that $100,000, within 6 months, I don't know how they disappeared. And my life is just so miserable. So we think that, money will give us a good life, but money will never give us a good life. It will make it even more miserable if the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not there. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself says, وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ ذِكْرِي فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكَ وَنَحْشُرُهُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ أَعْمَى. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will resurrect him. We will resurrect him blind. He will ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, "Oh Allah, why did you لِمَ حَشَرْتَنِي أَعْمَى وَقَدْ كُنْتُ بَصِيرًا?" I had eyes in this world, but you resurrected me blind. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say, وَكَذَلِكَ الْيَوْمَ تُنْسَى. The dhikr reminder came to you. People reminded you. People come to us. Right now, this halaqah is also a form of reminder. Sometimes people will come to your house and knock on the door and remind you. Your father will remind you. Quran is the biggest reminder. Inna hadihi tadhkira. Taha ma anzalna alayka al-Qur'ana tadhkira illa tadhkiratan liman yakhsha. So Quran is a reminder. It is called what? Tadhkira. It's a reminder. Quran is the ultimate reminder. So this reminder is always there. But we are blinded by that. There's another clear verse that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَمَنْ يَعْشُ عَنْ ذِكْرِ الرَّحْمَنِ نُقَيِّدْ لَهُ شَيْطَانًا فَهُوَ لَهُ قَرِينٌ. Those who understand Arabic language, they will understand the word asha ya'shu. In Arabic, one is asha means a dinner, but asha ya'shu, this verb means to be blind. When you're blinded, it means to be blind. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala literally says, وَمَنْ يَعْشُ عَنْ ذِكْرِ الرَّحْمَنِ. The one who has been blinded with my remembrance. عَنْ ذِكْرِ الرَّحْمَنِ. With the remembrance of Rahman. وَمَنْ يَعْشُ عَنْ ذِكْرِ الرَّحْمَنِ. So the person, he knows there's Quran there. He knows there's so many ways where he can be reminded of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He can go to those places where he can start doing the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it's like a blindfold. He puts that on and he deliberately does not go there. And he goes to places totally opposite of that. So that person is blinded. That he knew where he was supposed to go, but he does not go there. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in this verse here, that when a person ignores these halaqas here, masajid, salat, all these things, and he goes to places where he's not supposed to go to, نُقَيِّدْ لَهُ شَيْطَانًا فَهُوَ لَهُ قَرِينٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will appoint a shaitan for him. نُقَيِّدْ لَهُ شَيْطَانًا فَهُوَ لَهُ قَرِينٌ. And he will become a very close friend of him. And then what is he going to do? نُقَيِّدْ لَهُ شَيْطَانًا فَهُوَ لَهُ قَرِينٌ وَإِنَّهُمْ لَيَصُدُّونَهُمْ عَنِ السَّبِيلِ وَيَحْسَبُونَ أَنَّهُمْ مُهْتَدُونَ. Now this qareen who becomes a very close friend of his, he does, how we, in our language, I do whatever I feel like doing. I want to watch a movie, I watch a movie. I feel like eating something, I'll eat something. I feel like going to work, I'll go to work. So that person does not realize that he's actually being driven by that shaitan, a friend of his. So وَإِنَّهُمْ لَيَصُدُّونَهُمْ عَنِ السَّبِيلِ. Look at the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That this person here, he is being stopped from good things. وَإِنَّهُمْ لَيَصُدُّونَهُمْ عَنِ السَّبِيلِ, from the straight path. وَيَحْسَبُونَ أَنَّهُمْ مُهْتَدُونَ. But this person thinks he's doing the right thing. You ask any person, maybe anyone who's doing something wrong, any person who's doing wrong, you ask that person, will he ever say, maybe if he is aware of Allah Ta'ala and God conscious, he may say that, yes, I am doing wrong. But most of the people, they will justify. If you have a person who's backbiting, he's going to justify. He's going to justify that, oh, I'm just telling you the truth. Brother, why are you backbiting about so-and-so person? There's nothing you need to discuss about him. Fine, whatever happened, that's his matter, leave it. Oh, but I have to tell you the truth. Well, we know backbiting is the truth. So anyone that does something wrong, why does it? He justifies it. So that person who is doing wrong, so we're not even talking about the people who are totally in maybe clubs and those type of people. I'm talking about shaitan. He also confuses us type of people. Who come to the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that وَإِنَّهُمْ لَيَصُدُّونَهُمْ عَنِ السَّبِيلِ وَيَحْسَبُونَ أَنَّهُمْ مُهْتَدُونَ. That person, he's doing some completely wrong. But when you ask him, brother, why are you doing this? Brother, why are you fighting? What's wrong? What did I do wrong? Brother, why are you talking back to your father? Okay, what did I do wrong? He doesn't listen to me. I have to tell him this. So every person has some kind of justification. Even though that person is wrong, he still has justification to justify his action. Even though his actions are wrong, he still justifies it. Why is he doing that? This is a very common thing that we find. He will hurt someone and he will still justify, well, I had to. He was going out of control. I had to give him one. So why? Because the shaitan is with him. Shaitan is motivating him. And shaitan stays with him. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not wake him up, then what happens? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says further, وَإِنَّهُ لَيَصُدُّونَهُمْ عَنِ السَّبِيلِ حَتَّى إِذَا جَاءَنَا قَالَ يَا لَيْتَ بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَكَ بُعْدَ الْمَشْرِقَيْنِ فَبِئْسَ الْقَرِينُ. Now this person will regret so much that the shaitan will keep him sleeping from the reality of this world, and he will not be able to wake up to such an extent that حَتَّى إِذَا جَاءَنَا, when he comes into the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he will regret. And that day he will say, يَا لَيْتَ بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَكَ بُعْدَ الْمَشْرِقَيْنِ فَبِئْسَ الْقَرِينُ. Only if there was the distance between me and you, the distance of east and west. But وَلَن يَنْفَعَكُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, today it's not going to benefit you. So my respected brothers, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has explained to us in this verse as well, the person who blinds himself from the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that person is also doomed because the shaitan will be appointed for him. One more verse. وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ وَمَنْ أَظْلَمُ مِمَّنْ ذُكِّرَ بِآيَاتِ رَبِّهِ. I'm sure you read this verse all the time. Every Friday, you read this verse here. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say, we say zalim. When someone hurts someone, look at this person is zalim. This person is cruel. So, we like to call anyone who does something wrong to someone, man, this person is zalim. This person is a cruel person. This person is a wicked person, evil person. But look at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says here, وَمَنْ أَظْلَمُ مِمَّنْ ذُكِّرَ بِآيَاتِ رَبِّهِ فَأَعْرَضَ عَنْهَا وَنَسِيَ مَا قَدَّمَتْ يَدَهُ إِنَّا جَعَلْنَا عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ أَكِنَّةً يَفْقَهُوهُ وَفِي آذَانِهِمْ وَقْرًا وَإِن تَدْعُوهُمْ إِلَى الْهُدَى فَلَنْ يَهْتَدُوا إِذًا أَبَدًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Kahf that وَمَنْ أَظْلَمُ. How great of a zalim is that individual? How cruel is that person? How evil is that person that he was reminded ذُكِّرَ بِآيَاتِ رَبِّهِ. With different signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala he was reminded. Many different signs. The Quran itself, Allah Ta'ala shows us signs. From time to time, Allah Ta'ala shows us the reality of this world. But what happened? ذُكِّرَ عَنْ آيَاتٍ فَأَعْرَضَ عَنْهَا. He ignored it. He ignored it. It's like a doctor. The doctor says, look, your heart patients, you're diabetic. Please stay away from this. Please stay away from that. Otherwise, it's going to cause you trouble. But the person says, I love my Coca-Cola. I have to have my Coca-Cola. I have to have my chocolates. I'm so used to it. I need to. Now he comes to a point, now when he is in a hospital. So my respected brothers, over here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, فَأَعْرَضَ عَنْهَا وَنَسِيَ مَا قَدَّمَتْ يَدَهُ. And he was such a foolish person that he continued to do, he did so many wrong things in his past life. وَنَسِيَ مَا قَدَّمَتْ يَدَهُ. He was so blinded that he didn't care at all of what he did in the past. وَنَسِيَ مَا قَدَّمَتْ يَدَهُ وَجَعَلْنَا عَلَىٰ قُلُوبِهِمْ أَكِنَّةً أَن يَفْقَهُوهُ وَفِي آذَانِهِمْ وَقْرًا. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, when a person becomes so blinded, signs after sign, he is reminded after remind. Parents remind him, ulama remind him, salat reminds him. There's so many reminders, but he's just totally blinded. And no one is waking up. Just to give you an example, some people, it might seem to be anecdote, but it is a reality. That, some people, when they're sleeping, brother, it's time for Fajr. Oh, okay. They wake up. MashaAllah, they're still reminder. They get reminded very quickly. Sometimes you have to shake them a bit. Why wake up? It's Fajr time. And then they wake up. Sometimes you may have to drag them a little bit. Why wake up? But you still wake up. And some people, they're so deep sleepers that no matter what you do to them, they will never wake up. Have you seen those type of people? I have seen those people. When we were studying in our madrasa days, there was one individual, he would sleep. And he would sleep so deep that the principal decided that he doesn't come for Fajr Salat and he's supposed to come for Fajr Salat. So make him sleep in the masjid. He can't sleep in his boarding. He has to go to sleep in the masjid. So in one side of the corner of the masjid, he was sleeping. Now we all stood up to pray Fajr Salat and he's still snoring. He's still snoring. So principal said, okay, this is not working too. So now what are we going to do? So principal said, you know what? Let's try one more thing. So what we tried is, the principal said, okay, tomorrow, he's going to sleep right here. He's going to sleep right here. And now when it was Fajr Salat, when it's time for Iqamah, people are like, wake up, wake up. Everyone was standing. It seemed like it was not Fajr Salat, but it was what? Janazah namaz. Because the person didn't wake up. He was still sleeping. Everyone is standing, and I was witness, everyone is standing there, and this person is still snoring. So sometimes we go into such a deep sleep, deep hibernation, that Allahu Akbar, such a ghaflat, a life of ghaflat, that Allah Ta'ala says about that person in the Quran. What does Allah Ta'ala say in the Quran? That person is like Alhaakumut takathur hatta zurtumul maqabir. That person is so distracted, alhaka, he has been so distracted, that the only time he will wake up is when he goes to the grave. My respected brothers, this is, may Allah Ta'ala protect us, that, Allah preserve us and protect us from being those type of people. They're so heedless, that only when they go to the grave, that's when they wake up. Because that is a very, 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 obviously we want to try to do something before that. Therefore, my respected brothers, this ayat here, I want to finish it off. Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran, وَجَعَلْنَا عَلَىٰ قُلُوبِهِمْ أَكِنَّةً أَن يَفْقَهُوهُ وَفِي آذَانِهِمْ وَقْرًا. Allah Ta'ala has made his ears also deaf. Filled his ears up. So now summun bukmun, he's dumb, deaf, and blind. He can't hear anything, he can't see anything, he can't listen to anything. وَإِن تَدْعُوهُمْ إِلَى الْهُدَى فَلَنْ يَهْتَدُوا إِذًا أَبَدًا. if you try to pull him towards guidance in hidayat, that person will not get hidayat. Therefore, my respected brothers, when Allah wants to give hidayat, we all want hidayat, right? We all want to be in the straight path. We want to be reminded again and again. Just one example. I'm very particular about my time. I remember I had a friend long time ago. I don't know where he is now, but in Thorncliffe days, he was working in a bank, and he was making a lot of money in the bank. Then he made tawbah from that no, I don't want to work in the bank anymore. So he got some other IT job. So one day I came home. I was about to have my dinner. I still remember. I just walked in, and I got a phone call from him, and he said that, Mufti Sahab, I need you to give me a reminder. I'm like, okay, what kind of reminder do you want? He said that, look, I just had an interview with one of the famous bank company managers, and I am offered such a job that my entire house can get paid off within 2 years, and it's a amazing, very appealing job. But I had made tawbah from working in a bank, and I don't want to work in bank anymore. So what did he? He said, just tell me something, because my iman is so weak. So on the phone, he asked me, and he said, just tell me a few things so that I can be calm and I can be satisfied with whatever I have. What did he do? He wanted what? A reminder. So reminder happens here. Sometimes you need spontaneous reminders. You might need reminder on the phone as well. You need with it all the time. We need reminder. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, Allah ta'ala has told us that, fadhakkir, always remind. We need to constantly remind each other, because this reminder we forget. So the more we remind each other, the more we know. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and I will leave you with this note here, that when Allah wants to give you something, this is, remember this, it's a very important, noteworthy point. That when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to give you something, then Allah will facilitate the asbab for that too. You understand what I said? When Allah wants to give you something, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will facilitate the asbab for it as well, meaning the means for it. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to give you a car, then Allah ta'ala will also facilitate the means for you to get a car. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to give you food, Allah will facilitate the means for you to get food as well. In a similar way, this is a lengthy point, but I'm trying to summarize it. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to give you hidayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will facilitate the asbab for hidayat as well. When Allah wants to give you hidayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will facilitate the asbab and the means for hidayat as well. So for example, like halaqas like this here, now you are constantly coming because you know that this is a means of hidayat. Coming to the house of Allah is also a means of hidayat. Listening to the Quran is also a means of hidayat. Allah will connect you to these things here. So we need to be grateful that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has connected us. There are people, even for 1 minute, they can't, talk about deen. They can't listen to anything about deen. But there are people, they can spend hours and hours listening to deen, and they don't get bored, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has connected them with that. Therefore, my respected brothers, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us tawfiq to be in a program like this, where we can be connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we should consider this a tawfiq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I don't know if you still remember that lesson or not. That any good deed that we do, what do we do? 3 things we need to keep in mind. The first thing is what? You are not sitting here on your own. Allah gave us tawfiq. Number 2, we are only sitting here what? To please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The motivation is what? Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number 3, we are only sitting here. Why? Because Allah will give us something much better in return in this world and hereafter. What Allah will give us, we don't know. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give us. And we leave it to Allah's judgment what Allah wants to give us. Inshallah, we will carry on. I only mentioned 1 point, but inshallah, we'll try to finish. Allah, hopefully. Inshallah, subhanallah, bihamdi, subhanakallah.